Stop right there. Where are you coming from?
We're just heading home, officer.
Home? I've seen this before. Where are your papers?
I'm not answering that. You don't expect me to carry it all the time. We've done nothing wrong.
Don't play with me. You people think you can just walk around here like you belong. Turn around before I make this a whole different situation.
It started as a routine patrol in a quiet residential neighborhood in San Bernardino. Nothing unusual, nothing urgent. But within minutes, a solo officer made a split-second decision based on nothing more than assumption, and that decision set off a chain of events that would escalate far beyond his control. What began as a simple walk home between a father and his young daughter quickly turned into a tense and deeply uncomfortable confrontation, one that unfolded in full view of the neighborhood. By the time it was over, the officer who initiated it all would be facing consequences he never saw coming, after underestimating who was watching, what was being recorded, and how fast the situation could turn against him. If you believe moments like this deserve to be seen and not ignored, subscribe now, because every part of this story shows exactly how quickly power can be abused and what happens when people decide not to stay silent. Carlos Navarro, a 34-year-old warehouse supervisor, had just finished a late shift and decided to walk the rest of the way home with his daughter instead of waiting for a ride. He'd lived in the area long enough to know the streets were usually quiet around this time. Nothing about the evening stood out. Cars parked along the curb, a few porch lights on, the distant sound of traffic a few blocks over. His daughter walked close beside him, holding his hand, talking about something from school. He listened, nodding occasionally, his attention split between her and the street ahead. It was routine, familiar, safe. A patrol cruiser rolled slowly down the street behind them. At first, Carlos barely noticed it. Cars passed through the neighborhood all the time. But this one didn't keep going. It slowed, then stayed behind them longer than normal. Inside the vehicle was Officer Darnell Harlow, a patrol officer known among a few colleagues for acting first and thinking later. He had a pattern, stopping people based on instinct rather than cause, often justifying it after the fact. That night, he didn't see a father and his child walking home. He saw something that, to him, didn't belong. The cruiser crept forward slightly, then stopped. A second later, the siren blared, loud, sudden, unnecessary for the situation. Carlos stopped walking immediately, instinctively pulling his daughter a little closer to his side. He turned, confused, scanning the street like maybe the sound wasn't meant for them. The driver's door swung open hard. Boots hit the pavement with purpose. "Hey, stop right there." The tone wasn't neutral. It wasn't routine. It came out sharp, like an order already backed by suspicion. Carlos didn't move. He raised one hand slightly, just enough to show he wasn't a threat. Is something wrong, officer?" The officer didn't answer that. Instead, he stepped closer, eyes fixed, already locked onto a conclusion. "Where you coming from?" Carlos blinked, caught off guard by the tone more than the question. "Work. We're just heading home." The officer glanced at the girl briefly, then back at him, dismissive. "Yeah? Where's home?" The question came quicker this time, tighter. Carlos pointed lightly down the street. "Just a few houses down." "Don't point. Just answer." The interruption was immediate. The girl's grip tightened around his hand. Carlos exhaled slowly, keeping his voice steady. "Okay, I'm just going to reach into my pocket." He moved slowly, exactly as instructed. The officer watched closely, tense for no clear reason. Then, without warning, "Why are you out here, man?" The question came out different this time, not curious, accusing. Carlos frowned slightly. "I just told you, we're walking home." The officer shook his head, almost like he didn't believe a word of it. "Nah, that's not what I asked you." The girl shifted behind him slightly, her voice small now. "Dad?" Carlos didn't look back. He kept his eyes on the officer, and the officer took one more step forward. "You got papers on you?" The question hung in the air for a second, heavy, and out of place. Carlos didn't answer immediately, not because he didn't understand, but because he did. "My ID is in my wallet," he said calmly. "I was just about to take it out." The officer shook his head, already irritated. "That's not what I asked you." His tone sharpened, louder now, like he wanted it to carry. "I asked if you got papers on you." Carlos stared at him for a moment, trying to keep the situation from slipping any further. "I'm a U.S. citizen," he replied, steady but firm. "My ID will show that." The officer let out a short breath through his nose, almost a scoff. "Yeah, that's so?" He stepped even closer, close enough that Carlos had to slightly angle his body to keep space between them without letting go of his daughter. "Dad," she whispered, her voice thinner now. Carlos shifted slightly, positioning himself more in front of her without making it obvious. "It's okay," he said quietly, not taking his eyes off the officer. "I just need to show him my ID." The officer wasn't listening. "Where you really from?" he pressed. "I just told you." "No, you didn't." The interruption came fast. "You gave me a location. I'm asking where you're from." Carlos exhaled slowly, controlling the frustration creeping in. "I live here, right here in this neighborhood." The officer shook his head again, pacing a step to the side, like he was working something out in his own head. Nah, that's not what I mean. Don't play dumb." His voice changed, less controlled, more personal. "Where are you from?" A pause. Then quieter, but heavier. "Originally." Carlos held his ground. "I was born here." The officer's jaw tightened. "Uh-huh." He glanced briefly up and down the street, then back at Carlos, like he was already convinced of something he couldn't prove. "Go ahead, get your ID." Carlos nodded once. "Okay, I'm reaching into my pocket now." "Slow." "I am." He moved carefully, pulling out his wallet and opening it just enough to slide the card out. He held it up, not too fast, not too slow. The officer didn't take it immediately. Instead, he looked at it from where he stood, like even touching it wasn't necessary yet. "What's that?" "My driver's license." "Hold it steady." Carlos kept his hand still. The officer stepped closer again, finally taking the card, but even then his eyes flicked between the ID and Carlos's face like he was trying to catch something. "You're nervous?" "No." "You look nervous." "I'm not." The officer tilted his head slightly, studying him. "People usually get nervous when they're lying." Carlos didn't respond. A door opened somewhere down the street, not loud, but noticeable. The officer's eyes shifted for half a second, then went back to the ID. "Carlos Navarro," he read out loud, like testing it. Then he looked up again. "And you expect me to believe you just live right down the street?" Carlos's voice stayed level. "I don't expect anything. I'm telling you the truth." The officer handed the ID back, but not in a normal way. He let it hang in the air for a second before releasing it, like a quiet form of dismissal. Carlos took it, slow and controlled, and slipped it back into his wallet. For a brief moment, it felt like maybe the tension might drop. It didn't. The officer took a step back, then another, creating just enough distance to look at both of them again. Then his eyes dropped to the girl. She immediately shifted behind Carlos. "Why's she so quiet?" he asked. Carlos didn't answer that. The silence stretched just long enough to make it worse. Then the officer's tone flipped again, sharper, more forceful. "All right, here's what we're going to do." Carlos felt it immediately. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. The shift in his tone made it clear this wasn't going to de-escalate on its own. "All right, here's what we're going to do," the officer said, stepping forward again, closing the small gap he had just created. "You're going to step over to the curb and keep your hands where I can see them." Carlos didn't move right away. "For what reason?" he asked, still calm, but more direct now. The officer's expression hardened. "Because I'm telling you to." "That's not a reason," Carlos replied. "We're just walking home. I've shown you my ID." The officer's jaw tightened. He didn't like being questioned. "Yeah, and I'm not convinced, so go ahead, move." Carlos glanced briefly down at his daughter. She was pressed against his side now, her hand gripping his shirt instead of just his hand. "It's okay," he said quietly to her. "Stay right here." Then back to the officer. "I'm not resisting you, but I'd like to understand what I'm being asked to do and why." The officer stepped in fast, too fast. "Don't start that," he snapped. "I don't need to explain anything to you right now." His hand came up, pointing toward the curb. "Move!" Carlos hesitated again, not out of defiance, but calculation. Every movement mattered now. "Okay," he said slowly, "we can step over, that's fine." He gently guided his daughter with him, keeping his movements visible, controlled. They stepped toward the curb. "Stop right there." They did. "Turn around." Carlos frowned slightly. "Turn around?" "Yeah, face away from me." The request wasn't casual anymore. Carlos didn't move this time. "I'm not comfortable turning my back without knowing what this is about." That was enough. The officer closed the distance instantly and grabbed his arm, tight. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," his voice low but aggressive. The girl gasped, her voice breaking immediately. "Hey, don't—" Carlos reacted on instinct, not aggression. He turned slightly, trying to keep his balance while not pulling away too suddenly. "I'm not resisting you," he said quickly. "You don't need to grab me like that." "Then do what you're told." The officer's grip tightened. The movement, the tone, it was too much, too fast. The girl's breathing changed, uneven now. "Dad!" Her voice cracked, and this time she didn't try to hide it. Carlos looked at her for a split second. "I'm right here," he said, steady but firmer now. "It's okay." The officer pulled again, trying to reposition him. "Hands behind your back." "For what?" Carlos asked, sharper now. "What am I being detained for?" The question hit something. The officer didn't answer it. Instead, "Stop resisting." "I'm not resisting." "Yes, you are." "No, I'm not. I'm asking you a question." The officer's frustration was visible now. His movements were less controlled, more forceful. "Put your hands behind your back." The girl started crying. No build-up this time. It just broke out of her. "Please stop. You're hurting him." Her voice carried, louder than anything else so far. A window slid open somewhere nearby, then another. Carlos didn't move his hands. "I'm not putting my hands behind my back without knowing why. I'm not doing anything wrong." The officer stepped in even closer, chest almost touching his. "You don't get to decide that." There was a pause, short, tense, loaded. Then the officer reached again, this time with more force, trying to pull his arm behind him. The girl cried out again, louder now. "Stop! Please stop!" And this time, it didn't go unheard. A voice cut through from across the street. "Hey, what's going on over there?" The voice carried across the street, sharp enough to cut through everything. "Hey, what's going on over there?" The officer didn't respond to it. He didn't even look. His focus stayed locked in front of him, grip still tight on Carlos's arm as he tried to force it behind his back. "Turn around," he repeated, louder now, like the interruption annoyed him. "I'm not going to keep telling you." Carlos adjusted his stance to keep his balance, careful not to make any sudden movement that could be twisted into something else. "I'm not resisting you," he said, breathing controlled. "You're grabbing me without telling me why." "Because you're not listening," the officer snapped back. "That's why." "That's not how this works," Carlos replied. "You need a reason." "I don't need anything from you except compliance." The words came out fast, impatient, like he'd already decided how this would end. Behind Carlos, the girl was crying openly now, her voice shaking with every word. "Dad, please, please!" Her hands were clutching his shirt, trying to pull him back without understanding what was happening. The officer finally reacted, but not to de-escalate. He glanced at her, irritation flashing across his face. "Step back," he said to her, dismissive. "This doesn't concern you." That only made it worse. "She's a child," Carlos said immediately. "You're scaring her." "Then you should have thought about that before making this difficult." The logic didn't make sense, and it didn't need to. He wasn't trying to explain anything anymore. Another voice joined from the sidewalk now, closer this time. "No, what are you doing? He's just standing there." Footsteps approached. The officer's posture shifted slightly, not calmer, just more aware, but his grip didn't loosen. "Stay back," he called out, without turning. "This is police business." Carlos tried again, more direct now. "What am I being detained for?" No answer. Instead, the officer pulled harder, trying again to force his arm behind him. That's when it crossed the line. Carlos instinctively tensed, not pulling away, but resisting the unnatural twist of his arm. "I'm not resisting," he said, louder now. "You're hurting me." "Stop resisting," the officer barked immediately, louder than before, loud enough for everyone to hear. The words didn't match what was happening, and now there were more eyes on them. A man stepped off his porch across the street, phone already in his hand. "Hey, I'm recording this. You need to relax." That got the officer's attention. He glanced over, just for a second, but it was enough to break his rhythm. Carlos felt it. The grip shifted slightly, not released, but not as controlled as before either. The girl moved quickly, wrapping both arms around Carlos's side now, crying harder. "Please don't take him! Please!" Her voice cracked through the moment, raw and desperate. For the first time, the officer hesitated, not out of concern, out of awareness. More movement on the street. Another door opened, then another. A woman's voice, firm this time. "I see everything. Don't try anything." The officer straightened slightly, looking around now, taking in the attention he didn't expect. Phones were out, people were watching. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. "All right," he said, voice tightening again as he turned back to Carlos. "That's it." His hand moved toward his belt. "Turn around, now." Carlos didn't move. "Or what?" he asked. The question hung there, direct, unshaken. The officer stepped in again, closer than before. "Or I'll make you." The words didn't land the way he expected. Instead of backing things down, the tension shifted around him. More movement, more voices, footsteps on pavement, doors opening wider. Carlos stayed where he was, his daughter still clinging to him, her face pressed against his side. He could feel her shaking now, not small movements, but full, uncontrollable fear. "I'm not turning around," he said, steady but firm. "You haven't told me what I did." The officer's jaw tightened. "I don't need to keep explaining myself to you." "You haven't explained anything," Carlos replied. That exchange didn't go unnoticed. From the sidewalk, the man with the phone took a few steps closer, keeping distance but raising his voice just enough. "He's right. What did he do?" The officer snapped his head toward him. "I said stay back." "I am back," the man answered, not moving. "I'm just watching." Another voice, this time from the woman who had spoken earlier. "We're all watching." That line settled differently. Carlos saw it in the officer's face, not fear, not yet, but irritation mixed with something else, awareness. Still, he pushed forward. "You're interfering now," the officer said, louder, projecting control. "All of you, back up." No one moved. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was resistance. Carlos took a slow breath. "I'm not resisting you," he said again. "You stopped me for no reason. You asked for ID, I gave it. We're walking home." The officer cut him off. "Yeah, and I don't believe you." "Based on what?" No answer, just a stare. Then the officer spoke again, but this time it slipped. "Because people like you don't just—" He stopped himself. Too late. The man recording reacted immediately. "People like what?" he pressed. The officer didn't respond to that. Instead, he stepped forward again, trying to regain control through movement. "Hands behind your back," he repeated. Carlos didn't comply. "I'm not doing that," he said, more direct now, "not without a reason." The officer reached again, faster this time, but before he could grab him, "Don't touch him." The voice came from closer now. The man had stepped off the curb, still recording, still steady. "You're already doing too much." The officer turned sharply. "Get back." "I'm not interfering," the man replied. "I'm documenting." That word hung in the air. Documenting. The woman stepped closer too, her phone raised, voice controlled but firm. "We saw how you started this." More presence behind them now. Not a crowd, but enough. Enough to change the dynamic. Carlos didn't move. He didn't need to. The situation was shifting without him. The officer looked around again, quick, calculating. For the first time, he wasn't the only one controlling the scene. But instead of adjusting, he got louder. "All of you need to back up now or you're going to be part of this." No one moved. The man spoke again, calm but clear. "You don't have a reason, that's the problem." The officer turned back to Carlos, frustration fully visible now. "See what you're doing? You're causing a scene." Carlos shook his head slightly. "No, you are." That landed. A pause, short but different. Then the woman spoke again, louder this time. "I'm sending this in right now." That changed everything. The officer's eyes snapped toward her. "What do you mean?" She didn't lower her phone. "I mean, this is already being reported." Another voice behind her. "Yeah, they're going to want to see this." Carlos saw it then, the first real crack. Small, but there. The officer's posture shifted, not relaxed, uncertain. And for the first time since this started, he didn't speak immediately. The silence didn't last long. The officer shifted his weight, scanning the small group that had formed. Phones were still up. No one was backing away. Carlos stayed where he was, his daughter still pressed tightly against him. Her crying had quieted slightly, but her grip hadn't loosened. Then, a new sound cut in. Distant at first, but clear. Another siren. Not aggressive like before. Controlled. Approaching. The officer heard it too. His head turned slightly down the street, just enough to confirm what it was. Backup. But this time, it didn't feel like support. It felt like scrutiny. The man recording spoke quietly, almost to himself, but loud enough to carry. "Yeah, someone called it in." The officer looked back at Carlos, trying to regain footing. "All right," he said, tone shifting again, less explosive, more forced control. "You're going to calm down." "I am calm. I've been calm this whole time." That cut through. The officer didn't respond to it directly. Instead, he gestured slightly with his hand, like he was trying to reset the scene. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be." Carlos shook his head once. "No. You stopped us for no reason. You grabbed me, and you still haven't said why." The words landed harder now, with witnesses. The officer glanced again at the phones, at the faces, at the attention. Then the approaching cruiser turned onto the street. It slowed as it came closer. No siren now, just presence. It stopped a short distance away. A door opened. Another officer stepped out, older, more composed, taking in the scene before saying anything. The energy shifted immediately. Not loud, not dramatic, but noticeable. The first officer straightened slightly, adjusting his stance, like he was preparing to explain something that didn't add up. "What's going on?" the new arrival asked, voice even. Before the officer could answer, "He stopped them for no reason," the man recording said. "He got aggressive right away," the woman added. "He tried to force him down." Another voice came from behind. It came all at once, overlapping, unfiltered. The officer raised his hand slightly. "All right, hold on." But it was already slipping. Carlos didn't move. He didn't speak yet. He let it happen. The new arrival looked from the officer to Carlos, then briefly to the child still holding on to him. "Sir," he said, directing it at Carlos, calm, "are you okay?" Carlos nodded once. "I'm okay. I just want to know why I was stopped." That answer mattered. The new arrival turned back. "What's the reason for the stop?" he asked. A pause. Too long. The officer hesitated just for a second, but it was visible. He was acting suspicious." "How?" The question came immediately. Another pause. "He was walking, looking around." That didn't land well. Even in the silence, it sounded weak. The man recording spoke again. "He was walking with his kid." The woman added, "They weren't doing anything." The officer's frustration came back, but this time it was contained, pressured. "You're not helping," he said. "I'm not trying to help you. I'm telling you what happened." The new arrival didn't react to the back and forth. He was watching the officer now, carefully. Then he spoke again, firmer this time. "Step over here for a second." Not a suggestion, a direction. The officer didn't move right away. "Right now." The tone tightened. That was enough. He stepped away, a few feet, then more, far enough to lower his voice, but not far enough to escape what had already happened. Carlos remained where he was, still, holding his daughter, listening, waiting, and for the first time since the siren went off, he wasn't the one being pressured. The distance between them didn't feel like much, but it changed everything. Carlos stayed where he was, his daughter still holding on to him, her face buried against his side. Her crying had slowed into quiet, uneven breaths, but she hadn't let go. A few feet away, the officer stood facing the supervisor, trying to explain what had already unfolded in front of multiple witnesses. "I told you he was acting suspicious," he said, keeping his voice lower now. "Wouldn't follow instructions." The supervisor didn't respond immediately. He just looked at him, then back toward Carlos, toward the child, toward the neighbors still standing there, phones raised. "What instructions?" he asked. The officer hesitated. "I asked him to turn around. He refused." "Before or after you put your hands on him?" That question landed harder. Another pause. The officer shifted his stance slightly. "I had to control the situation." The supervisor's expression didn't change. "Control what situation?" No answer this time. Behind them, one of the neighbors spoke up again. "He was calm the whole time." Another voice followed. "You came out aggressive from the start." The woman with the phone didn't lower it. "I've got everything on video." The officer looked over just briefly, but it was enough. The confidence he started with wasn't there anymore. The supervisor took a step closer, voice still even, but firmer now. "Did he threaten you?" "No." "Did he run?" "No." "Did he refuse ID?" "No." Each answer made it worse. The supervisor nodded slightly like he had heard enough. "All right." A short pause. Then, "Step back." The officer frowned slightly. "I am stepped back." "No," the supervisor said. "Step back from the scene." That was different. The officer didn't argue this time. He took a few steps back, then a few more, creating distance, real distance. The supervisor turned back toward Carlos. "Sir, you're not being detained." Carlos nodded once. "Okay." "That interaction shouldn't have escalated the way it did. You're free to go." Carlos didn't move right away. He looked down at his daughter first. "It's okay," he said quietly. "We're going home." She nodded against him but didn't let go. He adjusted slightly, guiding her with him as they stepped away from the center of the street. The neighbors made space without being asked. Some lowered their phones, some didn't, but all of them had seen enough. Carlos didn't look back. He just walked, steady, controlled, the same way he had been walking before any of this started. Behind him, the street didn't return to normal. The supervisor remained where he was. The officer stood off to the side, no longer in control, no longer directing anything, just waiting, watching for what was coming next. Because this wasn't over for him, not even close. If this story made you feel something, if you believe situations like this need to be seen, documented, and talked about, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Every story we bring shows real moments where decisions matter, where power is tested, and where accountability doesn't always come quietly. Stay with us for more.